today I'm making kale chips, and I'm really excited about this recipe because it's one of our favorites at our house. So I'm starting with one whole bunch of kale, and the kind I'm using is red Russian kale, and we know kale is a superfood. Kale is wonderful for us. Lots and lots of vitamins, nutrients, fiber, of course, the super important thing we need in our food, fiber. And you could also use lacinato. So it's going to make a more delicate kale chip than the red Russian. So red Russian is a little tougher. You could use green curly kale, really any kind of kale you want. Actually, we've used other greens in it too, just to see what would happen. So like collards, and they were a little bit delicate and kind of fell apart. So kale really is the way to go with these chips. But these are super healthy chips. They're nice and crunchy and crispy. Beat potato chips, hands down, any day. So what we're doing is tearing it into relatively large pieces, because if you've ever dehydrated anything, you know that it's going to shrink. And so if you have a tiny little piece of kale, it will just disappear into nothing. But so we're taking relatively large pieces of the kale, like that, and even larger. So let me pull all these off of here. All right, so we could put even big pieces like this, and that's perfectly fine because it will shrink down. So let me get the other one torn up here. And I already have an entire bunch of kale already washed and cut up into really large pieces. Once you wash it, and you do want to wash it, but after that, really dry it well, because the sauce that we're making will stick to it much better. If it's really wet, then the sauce isn't going to stick to the kale quite as well. The way I dry it is in one of those salad spinners, and I spin it, and then I actually put it out on kitchen towels and let it dry. You could, pat it dry with kitchen towels or paper towels, but you want a nice big bowl. This is a huge bowl of kale pieces. And then we're going to make the sauce that we're going to toss onto the kale leaves. So we're starting with one red bell pepper that's already cut up and seeded. And we have 1 cup of cashews that I have already boiled for about 10 minutes. You could also soak them overnight or pour hot water over them and soak them for a few hours. If you have a high-powered blender like a Vitamix or a Blendtec, that step isn't totally necessary, but I do think it's good for getting your cashews to get really plump and full of liquid. So we'll add those. That was 1 cup that got really plump, so it's probably more like 1.5 cups at this point. And then we have a couple of tablespoons of nutritional yeast, and I'm using this kind, Anthony's nutritional yeast flakes, which I buy really big bags of nutritional yeast because I use a lot of it. And then we have the juice of probably two lemons. So it's 3 to 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. And we have a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric, because turmeric's super good for us, and it's going to give the kale chips a really nice color. And we have 1 tablespoon of agave. You could also try maple syrup. If you want to, you could try a couple of dates with the pits removed and make sure they're nice and soft. If you have really hard, dry dates, you could soak them first in some warm water to plump them up a bit. And we have a 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder and just a 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of iodized sea salt. If you were on a low sodium diet, just leave it out. It's fine. And then we're going to whirl that all up. All right, that's probably good enough. All right. Yes. Okay, so you just want to make sure that it's nice and smooth. Here comes the fun part. Okay, so this is really messy, so I'm going to use gloves. You don't have to use gloves. If you're making it for yourself, for your family at home, you don't have to, but it does get super messy. And it almost becomes a two-person job. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so we're pouring the sauce over the top. You want to get every last bit out of there. Okay, so get all that good sauce onto the kale. I'm going to put gloves on because this is really, really messy. So I'm going to get my gloves on. And we want to make sure that every piece of the kale is really well coated with this sauce. Woo, here we go. Okay. You could use a couple of, spatulas or something to do this, but it's going to work a lot better if you actually just get your hands in it and really get the sauce on every piece of kale. And then once all of the kale is very, very well coated, so here's a piece, nice big piece like this. Okay, and it's coated on both sides with the sauce. And then I'm using my dehydrator. So I have dehydrator trays. I'm actually using a dehydrator that's probably 30 years old. It's a American Harvest dehydrator that I've had for probably more than 30 years. So we'll lay the pieces out on the dehydrator tray. And you want to really go ahead and fill up the whole tray, but make sure that the pieces aren't touching each other because we want them to get really dried all the way through. Okay. So I get my trays really, really full. And the funny thing is, they don't look so full in the morning afterward. The pieces just shrink down so much. Okay, so once you've got a whole tray filled, your kale sometimes will fold over on itself. And so you want to open the leaves up and make sure they're laying flat. They aren't touching each other and they're opened up flat, so they're not folded up. And you will end up with many, many trays filled with kale chips. Okay, so, and I'm going to show you, take these off. This is why I wore gloves, so I can show you. This is my dehydrator, and this was stacked up with that one more tray. But before I got up this morning, my husband actually ate all the kale chips off that tray, which is why I have an available tray. So I will show you. He must have eaten them at 6 o'clock this morning. Okay, so after they're dried, they've shrunk up quite a bit, but they're super, super crispy. You could do this in the oven as well. So every one of these little levels is just filled with kale chips now. And so you could get a big bowl and just flip the tray over into the bowl. One of the things that we do is take a toothbrush that we got from the dentist's office that was never used in anybody's mouth, brand new toothbrush, and just flip it over onto a bowl and gently brush the leaves off from the other side. But because sometimes they stick, but this is one nice big bowl of kale chips, and they are very crunchy, very, very good. I'm honestly just amazed that I still have any left because my husband is a kale chip fiend, and he's standing here right now wanting to eat all of these. So I'm going to hand them to him. So, but I'll make more. So you can do this in the oven. So what you would do is take some baking sheets. You're going to do this exact same thing. Make the same sauce. Toss it on the kale chips just like that. Nice big pieces because they will shrink down. And then put it in the oven, no more than 300 degrees. You could go with 275. If you're going at about 300 degrees, really watch because they will go quickly. When we do this in the dehydrator, I do it overnight. So I made these last night and then woke up this morning and they were ready. So except for the whole tray that my husband ate in the middle of the night at some point, apparently, maybe 6 o'clock this morning. But it works overnight. And so that's the really cool part about making it in a dehydrator is once you've gotten it going in there, it's hands-free. It's going to just dehydrate all night. If you do it in the oven, really watch because you're going to have to be a little more hands-on with it and watching to make sure that it doesn't burn or doesn't get overly dried out. You could do it at 275 and go a little bit longer, maybe 30 minutes. If you're doing it at 300 degrees, go for about 20 minutes, but really check and make sure they're not burning or getting overly done. So the dehydrator, if you're doing it in the dehydrator, you're going to do it at about 118 degrees. And my dehydrator says fruits, vegetables. It has different settings, but I actually just look at the thermometer on it and I put it at 118 degrees. And it comes out perfect every single time, just overnight. I don't know. There's not really an hour amount of time. It probably could have gone for an extra hour or two and been fine, because dehydrating is a very slow, gentle process.
Yeah, thank you for watching.
Click at the top for videos that we have found to be very important.
Click at the bottom right to see one of our featured videos.
Please subscribe to our channel by clicking our icon at the center of the screen.
And turn on notifications so that you can get our videos when the fruits and vegetables featured in that video are in season and at their best.
See you next time.